Sometimes, a routine traffic stop is anything but routine. What you're about to see is a story of justice being tested, lives being upended, and truths that demand to be heard. Let us know in the comments what you think. Should justice be blind, or is it already tainted? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Ye Empowering Stories for more eye-opening tales. It was a crisp Monday morning, and the city was alive with the rhythm of the weekday rush. The sun gleamed off the hoods of countless cars on the interstate, their drivers preoccupied with thoughts of meetings, deadlines, and coffee breaks. Malcolm Hart, a sharp-dressed black man in his mid-30s, gripped the leather steering wheel of his spotless black sedan. His tie was loosened slightly, and his Bluetooth headset blinked as he ended a call with his boss. Today's agenda: a critical pitch to a high-profile client in the neighboring city. His car, a late-model electric sedan, hummed smoothly, matching his meticulous nature. As he merged into the middle lane, a sudden flash of red and blue lights filled his rearview mirror. His heart sank. The police cruiser pulled him over on the shoulder of the highway, a narrow strip bordered by yellowed grass and gravel. Malcolm exhaled sharply, adjusted his tie, and rolled down the window as the officer approached. The officer, Sergeant David Reynolds, was a towering figure in his 40s with a clean-shaven face and piercing blue eyes. His patrol uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming in the morning light. To passers-by, he looked like the embodiment of authority. "Morning," Reynolds said, his voice curt. "License and registration." Malcolm handed them over with steady hands. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Routine check," Reynolds replied, his eyes scanning the interior of the car. He leaned closer. "You in a hurry?" "Just heading to work," Malcolm said, keeping his tone measured. Reynolds nodded, studying Malcolm for a moment longer than necessary before stepping back to his cruiser. Malcolm watched him in the rearview mirror, his gut nodding. He had nothing to hide, but the officer's demeanor felt off. Reynolds took his time running the plates and license. Back in his cruiser, he opened a compartment in the dashboard. Inside was a small baggie of white powder. He stared at it, then at Malcolm's car. His face betrayed no hesitation as he slipped it into his pocket. Walking back to the sedan, Reynolds tapped on the window. "Step out of the vehicle, please." "What's the issue?" Malcolm asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "Step out, sir," Reynolds said, his tone firm. Malcolm complied, standing on the gravel shoulder as cars sped past. "I'm going to do a quick search," Reynolds said. "Search? On what grounds?" Malcolm's brow furrowed. "Suspicious behavior," Reynolds replied vaguely, motioning Malcolm to stand by the rear of the car. As Malcolm stood there, Reynolds crouched by the driver's seat, subtly pulling the baggie from his pocket and slipping it under the seat. Rising, he nodded toward Malcolm. "Stay put." Minutes later, Reynolds emerged holding the baggie aloft. His expression was grim. "Mind explaining this?" Malcolm's eyes widened. "What? I've never seen that before." Reynolds shook his head, signaling for backup on his radio. "Looks like we've got a problem, Mr. Hart." Flashing blue and red lights reflected off the glossy black paint of Malcolm's sedan as backup arrived. Two additional officers stepped out of their cruisers, surveying the scene. Malcolm stood stiffly, his heart pounding, as Sergeant Reynolds motioned to them. "Bag of narcotics under the driver's seat," Reynolds said flatly, holding up the small baggie. Malcolm's voice rose with frustration. "That's not mine. I don't know how it got there." One of the other officers glanced at him but said nothing. They cuffed Malcolm, his hands restrained behind his back, and read him his rights. His mind raced. This had to be a mistake. The officers escorted him into the back seat of a cruiser. From the rear window, Malcolm watched as a tow truck pulled his car away, his day spiraling further out of control. Hours later, Malcolm sat in a cold, gray holding cell, his suit now wrinkled and his tie undone. His phone call had been to his boss, Robert Connors, a senior executive at the marketing firm where Malcolm had worked for years. Connors, a middle-aged man with a reputation for fairness, was stunned by the news. He immediately contacted the firm's legal team and began investigating. "That doesn't sound like Malcolm," Connors said to a colleague. "He's one of our best employees, always professional, always reliable. I'm going to the courthouse myself." A week later, Malcolm stood in court, his lawyer, Lisa Grant, by his side. Grant was a no-nonsense attorney with a sharp mind and a passion for justice. Her curly hair framed her determined face as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor, my client, Malcolm Hart, is a man of exemplary character. He's held a spotless record in his career and personal life. The charges brought against him are based on questionable circumstances." The prosecutor presented the evidence, the baggie of narcotics allegedly found in Malcolm's car. Malcolm sat quietly, his hands clasped, as Lisa rose for cross-examination. "Sergeant Reynolds," she began, addressing the officer on the stand. "You claim to have found this baggie under the driver's seat?" "Yes," Reynolds replied, his face expressionless. "And this discovery was made after you conducted a search based on suspicious behavior, is that correct?" "Yes." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Yet my client has no prior record, no history of substance abuse, and was fully cooperative. Isn't it true that you had no probable cause to conduct the search in the first place?" The courtroom murmured. Reynolds hesitated. "I followed protocol." Lisa held up a document. "Your protocol, Sergeant Reynolds, seems to have led to multiple complaints of misconduct in recent years. Isn't it true that you've been previously accused of racial profiling?" The murmurs grew louder. The judge rapped the gavel. After days of testimony and compelling evidence presented by Lisa, including a lack of fingerprints tying Malcolm to the baggie, the judge dismissed the charges. "Mr. Hart," the judge said, "you have been wrongfully accused, and this court finds you not guilty." Malcolm exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. Outside the courthouse, Malcolm's boss, Connors, greeted him with a firm handshake. "We've got your back, Malcolm. You're an important part of our team, and I'll make sure this doesn't affect your career." Sergeant Reynolds wasn't as fortunate. An internal investigation into his actions led to his suspension, pending further review. Justice prevailed today, but the road to get there wasn't easy. Malcolm's story reminds us all of the importance of standing up for what's right. What do you think about the outcome? Should officers like Reynolds face harsher consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned to empowering stories for more tales of resilience and truth.